So I'm a little late to talking about last week's Mandalorian episode 4, The Foundling. I think, I wrote about it finally yesterday. I got a post written. I watched it on last Wednesday. I watched it, and I had to sit with it for a while because it wasn't a terrible episode. It wasn't a very good episode either. And I just wanted to sit and think for a while about what it was that bothered me so much and that has been bothering me this season when I look at it as a whole. I thought, okay, so just the first episode seemed a little slow going, but whatever. I wrote that off as like, we're returning to the Mandalorian, we're setting things up, we're just getting into the groove. It doesn't have to be this big, exciting, huge, awesome episode. Let's see where it goes. Second episode, Din Djarin and Grogu head to Mandalore, which was pretty cool. And this episode was actually pretty neat. There was this, there was the alien with the different mech suits down below in the mines of Mandalore, the mines of Moria. There was, the mythosaur that we see underneath in the living waters that Bo-Katan sees. And it had this feel of a sort of a Dark Souls-y episode, actually, which was pretty cool. I mean, it was one of the better episodes of The Mandalorian in a lot of ways, just because they had some really creative bad guys. It was fun. Then we get to episode 3, which is this huge diversion following the scientist that's working on cloning stuff. He had been working with Moff Gideon to experiment on baby Yoda, and he's sort of tricked and bamboozled by another reformed Imperial. And the problem with this episode is just that it was poorly executed, and this story just went on and on and on. It should have been woven into the Mandalorian story. They didn't have to do it all at once. They could have made it a little less on the nose. It was very, very poorly, just extremely telegraphed what was coming, that this woman was not trustworthy. And it's a character we don't really care about. So even though maybe there are some things there that are interesting, ultimately it just felt kind of like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this right now? And then the fourth episode, much shorter, but didn't feel like it. I think, and here's the conclusion I've come to. The Mandalorians themselves are a big part of the problem. We start at the very beginning of The Mandalorian. We start by meeting Mando, and he captures his bounty after getting in a fight with some other people, and just he's a total badass, right? Right off the bat, you get this feeling like, holy crap, here is this like space cowboy. He's, the strong, silent type. He's no nonsense, and he'll kill the shit out of you. Don't mess with this guy. He is tough. And though there were other Mandalorians he encountered, they were generally, few and far between. And, they show up at one point to help him, or, he interacts with the armorer, but mostly they're kind of off to the side. And The Mandalorian is about one Mandalorian, not Mandalorians, until he meets Bo-Katan and then has a couple adventures with her. But still, for the first couple seasons, this is The Mandalorian. It's just about him. He is a tough fighter. He's a badass, yada, yada, yada. Well, the first signs of things going wrong, I guess, were probably in the book of Boba Fett, because Boba Fett in this show is presented as just kind of weak and not very smart. He never wears his helmet. We got the opposite problem in The Mandalorian, which I'll get to in a second, but really you just get this, everything that made Boba Fett cool, it was gone. It was just thrown out with the book of Boba Fett. He's not cool anymore. He's just an old guy who's put on some weight while he was, being digested for infinity. He's put on some weight, and he's gotten old, and he is just sort of not great at what he's trying to do, being a crime boss. And then in this show, we have, the covert the Mandalorian covert of the Watch, the fanatical group that Mando belongs to, and they kind of suck. In the first episode, they're attacked by the alligator monster, and they can barely fight the thing off, and they are also too dim to run away into their cave, where presumably they'd be safe. Then, just a few episodes later, their foundling child is captured by a big flying dragon bird thing, and we learn that this thing always gets away. They're not able to chase it, and they've never bothered to go hunt it down and kill it, even though apparently it keeps stealing members of their group, which are apparently expendable. Before this happens, and I'll get back to this, but before this happens, we have a scene where Baby Yoda and one of this foundling that's then captured are training together, and they're going to practice with training darts. And what this training sequence amounts to is these two kids shooting paintballs at each other from 4 feet away. It's a really bad scene. I honestly don't know how they thought that this would be a cool training scene or like some exciting competition. Like, it's even where the other Mandalorians are training, they're just kind of shooting at nothing, just shooting into the desert. Like a bunch of rednecks with shotguns down at the lake, shooting at fish. Then they go and they have Bo-Katan leads the search party for the boy. And when they get to where the monster's nest is, they get to the base of this. They can't fly in because they don't want to alert it. They get to the base of it and they're like, let's camp here for the night. We'll go up in the morning. We'll climb. I don't know about you, but as a parent, and this is the kid's parent saying this, as a parent, if a big dragon bird took my child away and I had now hunted it down to its nest, I would not sleep the night away before climbing up there to save my kid who is about to be eaten. I have to wonder what the writers are thinking at this point. And there are so many goofy things, like Bo-Katan asks how they eat, and we learn that the way Mandalorians eat is they all go and they take their helmets off in private and eat and then come back to the fire. And the only thing I could think at this point was, how do they know when to come back to the fire? Like, what if Bo-Katan is just sitting there eating, and she's a slow eater, right? Everybody knows that. And then Mando walks in, and there she is, with her helmet off, and now she's got to go bathe in the living waters of Mandalore. Maybe he does too for walking in on her, practically naked. The no helmet rule is just, at this point, it's just too silly. I don't know. Here's my take on this. I could understand if they said no helmets around outsiders. When you're out in public, you don't take your helmet off. Strangers, whatever, even friends, if they're not part of the Mandalorian tribe, you don't take your helmet off around them. But here, among us, around your little baby that you've adopted, your foundling, you can take your helmet off to eat and to kiss and to brush your teeth and shit and to, like, you know, couple with one another. Like, there are too many things, you know, even in like an extremely conservative Muslim nation where women have to wear burqas or veils, when they go home around their family, their husbands and kids and siblings, they take that shit off. And it's not made out of metal. You know, I can only imagine the stink inside these Mandalorian helmets when they never get to take them off except for when they're not around people, and they're always around people. So, also, like, every culture ever has had meals together. It's just one of the most unifying cultural things it's just gone to a point where it's sort of silly. And then Bo-Katan kind of, I do think it's interesting. I really do think it's interesting, Bo-Katan sort of questioning her faith that it's all extremist and kind of thinking maybe they are onto something after seeing the mythosaur. That's kind of interesting. What I don't like is that Mando himself has sort of just given up any sort of like questioning of his own people and their belief system. He was on this road toward maybe changing, right? He took his helmet off for Grogu. He was doubting his people's extremism. And then that's just kind of gone now. He's just kind of a dopey, like, walk around, don't question anything, like, right back to, like, being a good boy. And there's nothing that really, I mean, he got he got excommunicated from his sect. I think it would be much more interesting if he actually had grown from that rather than just running right back to them for no particular reason, especially since, as we can see, they kind of suck. He saved them from the alligator thing because apparently they don't have a spaceship. I don't know how they got to this planet. Bo-Katan had to use her spaceship to chase down this dragon because, again, they don't have one apparently. They Mary Poppins through space with the Armorer's Forge and all their stuff, and somehow managed to get to this very, very pleasant planet that they're at, where monsters are constantly attacking them, and they can't fight back because they're just Mandalorians, just badass warriors. A commenter actually used this term Deuniquing, which I thought was really interesting. Apparently, some comic book writer, I can't remember who, had talked about this concept Deuniquing, where something that is unique, like Superman, for instance, is taken and then de-uniqued. Now Superman, there's Supergirl, Superwoman, Super this, Super that, all kinds of... You build upon this concept so much and you add so many characters that whatever made it unique is then gone. It's just normalized. The same thing, and I thought of this, is like the CW's shows Arrow and The Flash. Like those shows started out with some very unique heroes, like the Green Arrow, like The Flash. And the people around them were their helpers, their friends, their assistants, whatever. Maybe they brought their own unique skills, their intelligence, their computer skills, their whatever to the table, but they weren't unique. They weren't the hero. But by, I don't know, a few seasons into each of those shows, it's like every side character now has superpowers. And suddenly it's not really a show about The Flash or about Arrow. It's everybody, the whole ensemble cast. It's just a bunch of superheroes punching bad guys in huge, awfully choreographed fights. And we see this again and again and again in so many stories and shows where something cool is diminished. And I guess it's kind of similar to that concept of familiarity breeds contempt. But it's a case of bad writing. It's a case of letting the story get out from under you and losing control of the narrative or whatever. Here, The Mandalorian feels aimless. For a show that has the slogan, essentially, "This is the way," The Mandalorian has lost its way. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Yes, there are hints and clues that it's building towards Thrawn, that it's building towards other things that we've seen in Star Wars Rebels with the Clone Wars. I get that. That's cool. It's just not being done very well. I've seen some comments from people who are like, oh, real Star Wars fans, they like this. It's just the filthy casuals who don't get it. Very no true Scotsman of these fine fellows. Yeah, I get it. There are a lot of little hints leading towards a tie-in with the bigger Star Wars picture, including the sequel movies. And I don't care. Right now, The Mandalorian feels like it's being written by a completely different team of writers. There's that cool space western vibe is gone. Instead of leveling up, Mando seems to have leveled down. He is a worse fighter and a less of a badass than he was in the very first episode of the show. Weird little things keep happening, like him going to get IG-11 back. And I'm fine with them not bringing IG-11 back, but the fact that they just kind of like introduced that story and then dropped it like immediately is so strange. Like, I thought for sure we'd have some sort of quest to get the parts he needed for IG-11, and then we get IG-11 back, and then they'd go to Mandalore, but instead it's just like, oh, never mind, we're not actually going to do that, and we're not going to like build up to getting to Mandalore or make any particular challenge of getting to Mandalore. We're just going to do that right away in episode 2, and that'll be done. It's just a weird structure for this season, and I'm hoping that the next episode is a total about face, and suddenly we have like some plot. And we have a story to follow, and there's maybe a bad guy, like an antagonist of sorts. Ever since Moff Gideon's been gone, there hasn't really been one. And this is also reminding me of Book of Boba Fett, where they would introduce something cool, like the Hutts, the new Hutts, and then they just leave it. That's over. It's gone. We're not going to go back to that. It's so strange. Why take something cool and exciting and then just trade it in for like mundane, boring shit? I don't get it. How do you fix this show? I don't know. Right now, it's also suffering by comparison to Andor, which was phenomenal. But it doesn't have to. Like, this show can be its own thing. It should be a story of Mando being a badass bounty hunter, kicking ass and taking names and being, the strong silent type while undergoing personal change, right? And a personal arc, a journey, right? Maybe that has to do with Bo-Katan now. Maybe that has to do with getting Mandalore back. Whatever the case, that should be happening. We need more of that. The Mandalorian's fun to watch because it is like a space western where you're watching like the desperado, the most baddest ass of baddest asses, who, whenever he gets into a gunfight with somebody, is going to win. And then he suffers some kind of setback and you're worried about him for a minute, but you know he's going to win because he's a badass. That's all we need from this. We need a fun space opera. I think it was a real big mistake to bring back Grogu so soon. That felt more like a retcon than a story decision. We built up for 2 seasons trying to get him to his people. He gets taken by Luke Skywalker. Fucking cool, badass moment. And then in the Book of Boba Fett, he just is like, nah. Luke's like, no, you can't have it. You can't be both. You can't have any connection to your past. You have to be a Jedi. Not like Luke had to do that himself. Not like anybody demanded this kind of ridiculous shit out of Luke, but he demands it out of Baby Yoda, so he goes right back to Mando. And then it's just like, well, so much for the whole fucking story that we've gotten to for the last 2 seasons. It's just weird. I don't know. What are they doing here? Now it just sort of feels like this aimless, meandering nonsense show that isn't even as fun as it used to be. And the acting seems worse and the writing seems worse. And it's just like, you've had a couple of years to get this right. What are you doing? And I just don't know. And I'm very disappointed because I used to love this show. And I know, when I posted my review of the last episode, a lot of people were really angry. Like, there's this thing I always hear is, if you don't like it, then don't watch it. Yeah, well, that's bullshit, man. What if you love pizza and then all of a sudden one day everyone starts making pizza terribly and you're like, I would just like a good pizza again. And people are like, if you don't like pizza, don't eat it. No, I do like pizza. I want pizza still. Don't tell me that shit. Plus, it's stupid. If you tell people not to watch something, it's more likely to get canceled because people stop watching it. Don't you want the show that you like to continue? I want to keep watching it. I want to know what happens. I just don't want it to be bad. I know. Crazy. It's crazy. I'm crazy. Whatever. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that little bell down there so you can get notifications. And see you next time. Peace.